Presiding Officer, during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic in Scotland, thousands of people died. It's for those people that we should be thinking about our answers and our questions today. This government sent untested and COVID-positive patients into care homes with devastating consequences, and millions suffered from the effects of lockdown. That is why both the UK and Scottish COVID inquiries are crucial, because we need to understand what happened to learn lessons for the future. Now, the Deputy First Minister and First Minister have talked a lot about individual responsibility in relation to the inquiry, but the First Minister is responsible for the conduct of the Scottish Government. So will he take personal responsibility for ensuring the Government complies in full with all requests from the COVID inquiry?
First Minister.
It is, of course, my responsibility, and, of course, I will liaise closely, as Anas Sarwar would imagine I would, with the Permanent Secretary to ensure that the organisation fully complies. I said that to Anas Sarwar previously. We, of course, will hand over whatever material that has been retained from the Scottish Government. That is why 14,000 messages are in the process, WhatsApp messages are in the process of being handed over. I should say that is on top of the 19,000 documents that we've already submitted. So it is appropriate that, of course, every single member of the government, every single official in the government complies. I should say to Anas Sarwar on the specific point he asks, I am, of course, responsible for my witness statement. I don't know, of course, what other requests have gone to individual ministers, to individual cabinet secretaries, nor do I know what they have submitted. And that is appropriate. And Anas Sarwar is mouthing why. The reason why, of course, is there's confidentiality in a public inquiry, which must, of course, be adhered to. If I try to break that, Anas Sarwar would be the first one to drag me over the hot coals and say, why on earth are you breaching confidentiality of an inquiry that could potentially prejudice any said inquiry? And just to make it absolutely clear, my understanding is that that information about the confidentiality of the inquiry has been put into spice, but we can make sure that Anas Sarwar gets a copy for his information.
Anas Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, I think Humza Yousaf is missing the central point. He is the First Minister. He's responsible for the actions of the Scottish Government, ministers and officials, not just his own responsibility as an individual. And I don't think he's read the transcript from the COVID inquiry last week, which is absolutely damning about the actions of this government and his own behaviour. In June, I asked the First Minister directly, and I quote, will he confirm that all ministers and officials, past and present, have complied with the Do Not Destroy instruction, and will he give a guarantee that all requests, emails, text and WhatsApp messages will be handed over in full to the inquiry? He gave a direct answer. He said, and I quote, yes, they will. No equivocation, no caveats, no grey areas. But we now know that messages have been deleted. And crucially, it's for the judge to decide what is relevant, not for individual ministers and officials to decide what is relevant. And again, this is about the conduct of the Scottish Government. So can the First Minister tell us, of the 70 ministers and officials, how many have failed to comply with the Do Not Destroy notice and how many have deleted messages?
First Minister.
Can we just be absolutely clear about this? Anas Sarwar...
Members.
Anas Sarwar is asking me to demand from individual witnesses their witness statement so that I can see what they have handed over or what they have not handed over. Because that is the only way I could know if former ministers have submitted information or not submitted
Members,
information.
let's hear the First Minister.
That would be, in my view, a pretty serious breach in terms of the confidentiality of the inquiry. In terms of the organisation, which is what Anas Sarwar has also asked me about, yes, it is absolutely my expectation, the expectation of the Permanent Secretary, that potentially relevant information is kept, recorded in the appropriate way and handed over to the inquiry when that is requested. That is why, of course, we are in the process of handing over 14,000 messages. And Anas Sarwar is absolutely right. 14,000 of those messages, many of them, I suspect, I don't know because I haven't seen the detail, but I suspect, given that they were on WhatsApp groups, as we understand, as the Deputy First Minister outlined earlier this week, many of them may not be relevant. Anas Sarwar is right. That is for the inquiry to determine. Hence why I, as First Minister, will hand over all of my WhatsApp messages in an unredacted form. Because I go back to the point that I made to Douglas Ross. The reason for this inquiry, the Scottish inquiry being set up, was to get to the truth of matters. And that's why, in the terms of reference, the issue around the discharge of patients is clearly one of the issues that the inquiry will examine and one that we will fully cooperate with.
Anas Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, the public can see, and indeed the inquiry can see, that the First Minister was unequivocal in June, and now they can see how he's dodging responsibility in his answer to give today. And it's also clear that the Section 21 notice was issued to the government, not to individuals and ministers and officials, and it's the government that's responsible for collating and providing that evidence to the inquiry. So to abdicate responsibility, I think, is frankly shameful, and people will see that right across the country. But the harsh reality is this, Presiding Officer: the First Minister has lost control of his government. He doesn't know how many ministers or officials have complied with the Do Not Destroy notice. He doesn't know how many have deleted messages, and he claims that the government's response to the inquiry is for individuals rather than for his government. The First Minister promised this chamber he would ensure all material was handed to the inquiry in full. And this week we've seen how important these messages are. So can I ask the First Minister, why does he believe his government should be held to a lower standard than the Tories at Westminster? What is he doing to identify those who do not comply with the Do Not Destroy notices? And what action is he taking against those who failed to comply? Or should we conclude that his word means nothing?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, let me try to clarify again some of the issues that Anas Sarwar has raised. It's important to say, and this is crucial, that when it came to the request from the UK Government inquiry, in June, the inquiry asked us for details of the various groups, the WhatsApp groups concerning COVID-19. They did not request the messages themselves. The messages themselves were asked for in September, just a matter of weeks ago. We then, of course, the government, asked for a Section 21 order because of the personal information in some of those messages. And that was received. And now, of course, we will meet the deadline for the 6th of November to hand over 14,000 messages in unredacted form. And I can hear Jackie Bailey shouting, destroyed. The 14,000 messages have not been destroyed. We're handing them over. And they include ministers, past and present. We don't know the ministers because, again, for confidentiality purposes, but we know that they do include ministers past and present. I go back to the point here that Anas Sarwar, Douglas Ross have every right to ask about messages being handed over. So I can give an unequivocal guarantee to those families who have been bereaved by COVID that the messages that we have retained will absolutely be handed over and handed over in full. And that as First Minister, as the head of this government, I will, when submitting my statement, be handing over my messages in full and unredacted, Presiding Officer.